A crimson shockwave rippled across the upper stratosphere of Jaraxa Prime, slicing through the tranquil skies like a god's scar across heaven. The ethereal clouds, once glowing with bioluminescent serenity, twisted into violent spirals. Defense, sirens shrieked, and the once harmonious skyline, dominated by crystalline towers and luminal spires, descended into chaos. In the Citadel, the heart of the Galactic Council, 17 languages chattered across intercoms, overlapping in a symphony of panic. But even amidst the rising noise, there was a single chilling silence that cut through it all. There, leaving. Within the Grand Assembly Hall, a structure forged from lunar glass and dark matter alloys mined from neutron stars, the chamber vibrated, not from weapons fire or seismic activity, but from something far worse. Fear. It was subtle at first, like the hum of a coming storm. But it grew, insidiously, as realization spread through the room like a virus. Representatives of over 65 species sat motionless in their levitating thrones, their faces twisted in disbelief, rage, or something in between. And at the center of the storm stood them. The humans. Ambassador Rael Navarro, Earth's lead, envoy and voice of the United Terran Directorate, was not a towering figure. He didn't need to be. His presence was forged from something far more potent than stature: conviction. His dark uniform bore no medals, no glimmering rank insignias. Just the insignia of soul. An eclipsed star cradled by a ring of 7 orbits. His eyes were sharp, not from arrogance, but from centuries of generational grit. The kind born in the fires of survival, not luxury. "We are not pawns," Navarro said, his voice like tempered steel. "We are not tools. We are not your shock troops. We are not your cannon fodder. We warned you, we pleaded, we cooperated. And what did you give us in return? Surveillance cloaked as alliance, treaties written in ink laced with poison. And now, after all that, you expect us to stay?" His voice dropped to a whisper, but it struck harder than any scream. "We decline." Behind him, the entire human delegation stood unified. Fleet Admiral Kayla Monroe, whose orbital strategies saved the Archon Ring from collapse. Synth-born diplomat Echo 7, a biomechanical fusion of quantum AI and living tissue, its blue-gold optics processing 1,000 council expressions simultaneously. Even director Sahil Rao of the Martian Defense Consortium, long silent since the dust conflicts, was present, his red-tinted visor hiding both emotion and calculation. Every human faction, from Earth's oceanic arcologies to Pluto's nanite colonies, was represented. It was not a delegation. It was a wall. A message. The council chambers buzzed with frantic psionic energy. Zavakal of the Vren Collective, an ancient being of fused consciousness and crystalline biology, pushed forward, his voice layered with mental projections. "If the Terrans withdraw, the Scutum Wall will collapse. The outer rim will fall into chaos. What of the Tlari? The Markarn Raiders? You think they will wait?" Navarro didn't flinch. "Then prepare your defenses, or pray they don't come." It was over in seconds. The Terran banners hovering above the delegates shimmered, then dissolved. First Earth, then Luna, then Mars, until the entire Terran coalition vanished from the galactic stage. The symphony of light that had once declared humanity's allegiance was gone. All that remained was silence. Imagine. What if this happened to you? Imagine being in that chamber, watching an unpredictable force, your strongest ally, your most feared rival, simply walk away. No war, no shouting. Just a final, quiet exit that felt like the beginning of something far more terrifying than war. As the humans marched through the obsidian corridor toward their warship, the Dauntless, the station's energy grid flickered, not from damage, from withdrawal. One by one, the systems Earth had quietly integrated, security AI, warp field regulators, dark matter stabilizers, began to shut down. Entire districts of Jaraxa Prime dimmed, then fell into blackness. Without a shot fired, humanity had crippled one of the most technologically advanced planets in the galaxy. Not out of malice, but because it was theirs to take. Before we jump into this epic tale, Subscribe to HFY Chronicles for the most intense sci-fi battles, legendary warriors, and universe-shaking wars. Don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button and join the fight. As the Dauntless undocked from the assembly ring, its gravimetric engines bending space like melted glass, the planetary defense array blinked offline for precisely 16 seconds. Long. Enough for 3 species to initiate emergency protocols and 2 others to attempt black site data wipes. The fear wasn't just about losing protection. It was about losing relevance. For centuries, humanity had quietly become the foundation of the Galactic Council's unseen architecture. Their engineers reinforced broken systems without fanfare. Their soldiers fought wars other species couldn't stomach. Their AI mediated disputes behind layers of secure code. And all the while, the Council assumed the leash was mutual. It wasn't. From the asteroid rings of Seraph 9 to the waterworlds of the Hifera Drift, murmurs began to surface. Sectors where humans had set foot suddenly faced instability. Entire economies wavered. Pirate syndicates, long dormant, flared to life, emboldened by the sudden vacuum of power. And on the edge of the known galaxy, in the void dark sectors, where no law held sway, the Tlari scourge stirred. Their hives pulsed, their scouts emerged, but no one could reach Earth, not anymore. SolNet, Earth's once open galactic data relay, went dark. Terran beacons no longer responded. Stargates calibrated. To Sol coordinates began redirecting to null space. Humanity had not only left the Council, they had locked the doors behind them. No explanation. No treaty. No war. Just silence. And the galaxy shook. In the cold depths of space, where light barely reaches and shadows stretch across forgotten star systems, the absence of something, or someone, can be felt more than the presence of a force. And it was that absence, that sudden and profound void, that began to reverberate through the farthest corners of the galaxy. As humanity's departure from the Galactic Council echoed throughout the stellar systems, the galaxy's pulse began to falter. It wasn't just the absence of Earth that was unsettling. It was the profound realization that a power long underestimated had just claimed its own destiny. The first ripple to reach the heart of the galaxy came from the Syndicate of Trade and Exploration, a coalition of spacefaring mercantile species. The Syndicate had long traded with humanity, but never on equal terms. They had underestimated human ingenuity, relegating Earth's influence to a mere economic asset rather than a strategic player. Now, with humanity's exit, the balance of trade and power had shifted. The Syndicate's leaders convened on their flagship, the Ceres Vault, a leviathan of a ship that housed the wealth of 1,000 systems. "We cannot afford to ignore this," Varn Sella, the Syndicate's director, growled. His species, the tall, lithe Kavar, had evolved to perceive subtle gravitational shifts, an adaptation to their homeworld's erratic orbits. It was this sensitivity that allowed them to notice the gravimetric waves that rolled outward from Earth's departure. The Syndicate's wealth was not merely in the exchange of goods, but in the power that controlled the movement of information, resources, and most importantly, influence. The Kavar began calculating the effects of humanity's withdrawal from the Council's complex web of trade routes. The data was clear. The humans had been the keystone in the entire system. The quiet engineers that built interplanetary trade lanes, the bureaucrats who brokered interstellar peace treaties, and the deep space transporters that ensured the flow of supplies, they had all been Terran-made. Without them, the galaxy would fray at its edges. But worse still, humanity's vast knowledge in quantum encryption and long-range communications had been the silent hand that held galactic information together. The loss of access to SolNet meant the Syndicate's own networks were vulnerable. "To attack, to disruption. We have made a grave mistake," Varn muttered, staring into the quantum matrix of projections hovering before him. "We must act." Meanwhile, far in the distant Helios cluster, home to the Tlari, one of the galaxy's most violent and unpredictable species, the consequences were more immediate. They had been watching humanity from the edges of their domain for decades, like a predator studying prey. The Tlari had never fully understood the Terran psyche, but their instinct told them that humans were not a species to be trifled with. The sudden absence of humans from the Council ignited something inside the Tlari that had been simmering for years: rage. The Tlari had once attempted to invade Earth, their vast warships blotting out entire solar systems in their attempt to cripple humanity before it could rise. The invasion had failed miserably, and the Tlari had paid a heavy price. Their forces, while numerous, had been shattered by humanity's unpredictable combat style, strategic brilliance, and sheer will to survive. To the Tlari, humanity was a dangerous enigma, one they would never forget. Now, with the Galactic Council fractured, the Tlari saw an opportunity, a chance to reclaim their pride, to exert dominance over the systems that had once defeated them. They knew the Terran fleet would be formidable, but without the Galactic Council's oversight, there were no longer any barriers to their ambition. The galaxy would be their hunting ground, and their first target would be the outer colonies, the very worlds humanity had protected for generations. For the Tlari, it was a matter of pride and survival. For humanity, it would be a test of resolve, of the strength to stand alone. And it was a test that was fast approaching. The Tlari warships began to converge, massive ships cloaked in dark energy fields, their weapons primed. The fleet, known as the Rageborn Armada, moved with terrifying purpose through the deep space lanes. Their primary mission was clear: dismantle any resistance before it had a chance to organize. And while the Syndicate of Trade and Exploration scrambled to stabilize their weakened economic structure, the Rageborn Armada made its move. The first target, the outlying planet of Vera, a once vibrant world now teetering on the brink of civil unrest, one of the many former colonies that humanity had nurtured into prosperity. But Vera was not unprepared. Not anymore. In the shadow of Vera's moon, the dauntless, humanity's flagship, had already gathered. Its massive frame, sleek and intimidating, gleamed with cold, unrelenting power. The Dauntless was more than just a warship, it was a statement. Its design reflected humanity's most strategic minds, blending advanced gravimetric propulsion, quantum shielding, and AI-driven tactical algorithms. The ship was as much a symbol of humanity's scientific prowess as it was of their indomitable will. Admiral Monroe stood on the command deck, her hands steady as she navigated the data streams running in front of her. The crew of the Dauntless, a mix of human and allied species, was a well-oiled machine. They had been through countless drills, simulations, and real battles. They were ready for this moment, ready for the Tlari to come. "We've been waiting for this," Admiral Monroe muttered, her voice laced with calm determination. "Prepare for immediate deployment. Let them know. Humans may have left the Council, but we're far from finished." As the Admiral's command rang out across the ship's intercom, the hum of the ship's engines intensified, and the dark void beyond began to lighten. The Rageborn Armada, unaware of the Terran presence lurking in the shadows, would soon learn the hard truth. Humanity had not just walked away from the Council. They had taken control of their fate, and it would be their enemies who would tremble this time. From the farthest reaches of the galaxy, from the once untouchable galactic leaders to the most ferocious warlords, the truth became clear. Humanity was no longer bound by the rules of the Galactic Council, no longer shackled by its laws, alliances' fragile peace. They had left, but in doing so, they had become something far more dangerous, a force that would not only survive, but would rise to become the galaxy's most unpredictable and terrifying power. The deep silence of space was shattered by the unmistakable hum of engines powering up. The Rageborn Armada had arrived. Each warship in their fleet was a testament to the Tlari's brutal engineering prowess, a conglomeration of colossal energy cannons, razor-sharp hulls designed to withstand the most intense impacts, and cloaking technology so advanced that it could bend the very fabric of space itself. They were invisible predators, stalking the cosmos. Their arrival, initially unnoticed, would soon send shockwaves through Vera's fragile colonies. Admiral Monroe's fingers danced over the holographic interface, inputting data and fine-tuning tactical parameters. The Dauntless, humanity's pride, was prepared for the coming storm. Despite the overwhelming odds stacked against them, humanity's warship was unlike anything the Tlari had ever encountered. The humans had spent years developing technologies far beyond what the galactic leaders assumed was possible. The quantum disruptor cannons, capable of tearing through the very fabric of time-space, lay dormant, but ready. Their plasma fusion shields, able to absorb and redirect entire shockwaves, shimmered across the ship like a ghostly mist. And the AI systems that ran the ship were linked directly to human neural interfaces, allowing for instantaneous decisions in the chaos of battle. "We're outnumbered," Monroe said, her voice calm yet steely. "But we have something they don't have. A reason to fight." She wasn't just talking about the ship or the technology. She was speaking about humanity's spirit. The Talari may have been fierce, but they had never faced a species so relentless, so adaptable. Vera, a once-forgotten backwater colony, was now an example of humanity's resolve. The tension in the bridge was palpable. Each member of the crew was fully aware of what was at stake. A loss here could signal the beginning of humanity's fall from grace. Yet there was no fear, no hesitation. They had made a choice, and there was no turning back. Across the battlefield, the Rageborn Armada had begun to drop out of their quantum cloaks, revealing their full, terrifying might. The first ships, massive and menacing, emerged from the cosmic shadows with an eerie stillness. Their dark, nearly indestructible hulls blended perfectly with the void, making them nearly impossible to spot in the infinite blackness of space. However, the human ships had been anticipating this. They knew the moment the Talari ships powered up their weapons, they would reveal their position even for a split second. The Dauntless was the first to fire. With a devastating roar, the quantum disruptor cannons unleashed their fury. A brilliant pulse of energy surged through the darkened space, warping the very fabric of reality in its path. The first Talari warship, which had just begun to charge its main weapons, was ripped apart in an instant. Its massive frame shuddered and collapsed as the disruptor's energy tore through its shields, rending them asunder before disintegrating the ship in a cascade of brilliant light. It was a shocking display of human firepower, a clear statement that this would not be a battle of conventional space tactics. "First ship down," the weapons officer reported, her voice shaking with a mixture of awe and adrenaline. Admiral Monroe's lips curled into a tight smile, but her focus never wavered. "Keep your heads cool," she said firmly, her eyes scanning the incoming enemy ships. "This is just the beginning. We have to hit them hard and fast before they can regroup." Her orders were precise, and the crew followed with a level of efficiency only found in those who had been trained to face the impossible. Meanwhile, the Talari were reeling from the shock of their first loss. In their arrogant assumption that no species could match their might, they had underestimated the strategic brilliance of humanity. The Talari began to scramble, their ships realigning into formation. But it was already too late. The Dauntless had already launched its fighter squadrons, Talon-class interceptors, small but highly maneuverable vessels designed to dart in and out of enemy formations with pinpoint accuracy. They descended upon the Talari fleet like a swarm of hornets, tearing through the heavy shields of the enemy warships with a deadly combination of plasma laser beams and guided torpedoes. But the Talari were not easily deterred. A few moments after the first wave of attacks, their remaining warships launched countermeasures. Plasma coils, capable of generating short-lived but devastating electrical surges, rippled out in a spherical wave from each Talari ship, scrambling the human fighters' weapons systems and shields. However, the humans had anticipated this as well. The Talon-class interceptors immediately adapted, switching to secondary targeting systems that bypassed the plasma coils' interference. They were used to unpredictability. They had learned the art of thinking quickly in combat. The battle intensified. The Dauntless rained fire upon the Talari warships, dodging incoming plasma bursts and tearing through shields with relentless precision. The Talari, once so confident in their superior technology, were now learning a harsh lesson. Humanity had evolved past the limits they had once imposed on them. And the world of Vera, once left to fend for itself, was now standing its ground. In the heart of the battle, the Rageborn Armada realized that the fight was no longer just about defeating an inferior foe. It was about survival. Their confidence in their dominance was starting to erode, replaced by a growing panic as the Dauntless continued to inflict damage. Their ships began retreating, pulling back from the front lines as they sought to regroup. But the humans had already sealed their fate. Monroe watched the scene unfold before her. "This is it," she said, turning to her tactical officer. We push them until they break. I want those warships in pieces. But as the battle raged on, something unexpected occurred. In the far distance, emerging from a previously unknown hyperspace, rift came more ships, thousands of them, armed with advanced weaponry and the emblem of the Galactic Council. They had arrived, not to aid humanity, but to reclaim what was theirs, the Council's way of intervening, of forcing humanity back, under their control. As the Council ships emerged, the vast reality of what was happening became clear. Humanity had just ignited a war, not just against the Tlari, but against the very structure of galactic order itself, and the stakes were now higher than ever. The sight of the Galactic Council's ships flooding into the battlefield was both a threat and a declaration. These vessels, enormous and brimming with advanced technology, signaled that humanity's defiance had escalated from a localized skirmish into a full-blown galactic war. The ships' sleek designs gleamed with the brilliance of unshakable authority, their hulls adorned with the symbols of the Council, the self-proclaimed arbiters of order across the galaxy. Humanity had become a thorn in the side of the Council, and now they were here to crush it. Admiral Monroe stared out at the sea of Council ships, her mind racing. She knew the Council's reputation. Ruthless and unyielding, their forces could bring entire star systems to their knees. But she also knew that the Dauntless was humanity's last line of defense. With every ship in the fleet calculatedly placed, every squadron in their proper formation, the human warships stood ready for the fight. Yet even with their unmatched technology, the odds had just grown steeper. Monroe had always believed in the power of humanity's unity, but this was a different beast altogether. "They're here," Monroe muttered, her voice tight with both defiance and resolve. Around her, the bridge crew began to prepare for the next phase of the battle, their movements efficient but tinged with urgency. The Council's ships had arrived not to negotiate but to assert their dominance. Their mission was clear: to subdue, to pacify, and to reassert control over humanity. The Council's presence wasn't just a military move. It was an ideological one. For centuries they had maintained peace through order, stifling the very essence of individuality, growth, and free will that had defined humanity's rise. The Dauntless, however, had become the symbol of humanity's refusal to submit. But now, with the Council ships advancing, Monroe's heart began to race. They were outmatched, outgunned. Every calculation told her they couldn't win this battle. Yet, there was one thing the Council didn't account for: the unpredictability of humanity. Monroe knew that if they didn't act quickly, they would be swarmed. The human fleet had already been battered by the Tlari, and now this new threat was pushing them to the brink. The Dauntless, its energy reserves rapidly depleting, needed to make a decisive strike before the tide completely shifted. "Prepare the graviton cannons," Monroe commanded, her voice unwavering despite the chaos around her. "We only get one shot at this." Her orders were met with swift acknowledgement. The graviton cannons were a breakthrough human technology, a hybrid of gravitational wave manipulation and ultra-dense particle acceleration. These weapons could distort the fabric of space-time, generating immense gravitational anomalies capable of obliterating entire fleets in the blink of an eye. However, the weapon had one critical limitation: it required an enormous amount of energy, and using it meant risking total system failure. Yet, Monroe was convinced they had no other choice. The crew worked tirelessly, feeding power into the graviton cannons. Every second counted. Meanwhile, the Council's ships approached with terrifying precision. Their long-range weapons began to lock onto the Dauntless, massive energy beams illuminating the void as they surged toward the human flagship. But the humans had already anticipated this move. Suddenly, the Dauntless surged forward, cutting through the space between the incoming beams like a predator closing in on its prey. Monroe gritted her teeth, knowing that the true battle had just begun. She activated the quantum cloaking field, rendering the warship momentarily invisible to the Council's sensors. The human flagship moved like a phantom through the oncoming barrage, just out of reach, while the Council ships fired blindly into the void, unable to track their target. For a brief moment, everything was calm. The enemy fleet, now confused and scattered, faltered as the Dauntless made its move. The humans had created an opening, but it wouldn't last long. Monroe knew she had only a few minutes before the cloaking field's power would be exhausted, leaving them vulnerable. The bridge fell into a tense silence. Monroe stared at the readouts as they fed the final calculations for the graviton cannons into the main system. Every officer on the bridge could feel the weight of the decision. It was a one-shot gamble, the odds of success slimmer with every passing moment. As the final adjustment was made, Monroe's eyes flicked to the screen, watching as the first wave of Council warships locked their weapons onto them once more, their massive beams gathering energy. They were almost in range. "Release the graviton charge. Now!" With a loud, deafening rumble, the graviton cannons fired. A vast shockwave rippled through space, distorting light and gravity itself as the energy release tore apart the fabric of reality. The blast sent shockwaves across the battlefield, turning the space around the Dauntless into a maelstrom of twisted energy. The nearby Council ships, caught in the gravitational wave, were torn asunder. Their shields collapsed in an instant, and entire sections of their fleets were sucked into a singularity, vanishing without a trace. The sheer force of the gravitational anomaly buckled the laws of physics themselves, leaving the Council ships in chaos. But the battle wasn't over. The remaining Council ships, though shaken, remained formidable. They quickly began to reorganize, launching a counterattack with the precision of a galactic superpower. The Rageborn Armada, now regrouping, joined the fray once more, reinforcing the Council's position with their relentless firepower. But as the dust settled, there was one thing the Council hadn't counted on: humanity's resolve. The loss of so many ships, human and alien alike, had left the battlefield littered with debris, the remnants of once mighty fleets drifting in the void. But the most important realization hit like a thunderclap. Humanity had shown the galaxy that they would not be cowed, would not fall back into submission. They had made their mark. The Council may have had the numbers, the power, and the strategy, but humanity had something more powerful: the will to fight against impossible odds. Admiral Monroe stood at the bridge, watching as the debris of the battlefield drifted by. The battle had shifted, but it was far from over. The true test had just begun. The question now loomed in the vastness of space: could humanity truly stand alone, or would the weight of the galaxy crush them? But one thing was certain: the universe would never be the same again. The silence of space was unnerving, broken only by the faint hum of the Dauntless's engines as they rumbled softly through the dark void. The aftermath of the cataclysmic graviton blast had left the battlefield in disarray, a sprawling graveyard of shattered warships and drifting debris. The Council's might had been bruised, but not broken. Their resolve, like that of the humans, was unwavering. They had underestimated humanity once, and they would never make that mistake again. Admiral Monroe stood at the helm of the Dauntless, the weight of her choices pressing down on her. Every calculated risk, every daring move they had made had brought them here. Victory, it seemed, was still within reach. But it was a fragile thing, held together by the thinnest of threads. The remaining Council forces were regrouping, recovering from the shockwaves, and preparing for a counter-offensive. The humans had no illusion of safety. This was far from over. "Their fleets are reforming," said Lieutenant Alvarez, his voice tense. "They're reinforcing the rear lines, pulling in the Tlari fleet for a final push." Monroe's eyes narrowed as she studied the tactical display. The remaining Council forces, now even more brutal in their tactics, were consolidating. Their strength, seemingly preparing for a final all-out assault. The odds were astronomical, and the Dauntless's fuel reserves were nearly depleted. There were no more hidden tricks, no more secret weapons to deploy. The human fleet was running on fumes, and the enemy's resolve was growing stronger by the moment. But there was something else, something that only Monroe and a select few knew. "Activate the Omega Protocol," she ordered. A ripple of surprise spread through the crew, but they had learned long ago to follow Monroe's lead without question. The Omega Protocol was the ultimate gambit, an emergency measure that could either turn the tide of battle or hasten humanity's downfall. It was a last-ditch effort, a desperate card to play when all seemed lost. Yet, in the face of overwhelming odds, Monroe was convinced it was humanity's only hope. The Omega Protocol wasn't just a weapon. It was a philosophy, a final commitment to humanity's future, no matter the cost. It was a powerful transmission, sent out to every human settlement, Every surviving colony, every outpost scattered across the galaxy. It would galvanize the human race in a way that nothing else could. It wasn't just a rallying cry, it was a declaration. "This is Admiral Monroe of the Dauntless," her voice echoed across the galaxy. "We stand united. The Council may have brought their fleets to bear against us, but they do not understand our strength. We will not bend. We will not fall. We are humanity, and we will fight until the last breath. The future of the galaxy is ours to shape, and we will fight for it, together." As her message propagated across space, an incredible phenomenon unfolded. It began in the distant colonies, where human voices, seemingly from nowhere, began to rise in unison. Small resistance fleets, long hidden from the Council's view, sprang into action. Ships that had once sat idle, abandoned by the Council's earlier commands, powered up and began to rally around the human fleet. From the Yavaya fringes of the galaxy, ships long thought lost to history returned, their weapons armed, their crews fiercely loyal to the cause. What followed was nothing short of miraculous. The Council's forces, still in the midst of regrouping, suddenly found themselves surrounded by a new, unanticipated force. A coalition of every surviving human faction, every resistance fighter, every colony that had endured the hardships of the years. The sheer size of the new human fleet was staggering. Though many of the ships were smaller, older models, they carried with them an undeniable strength, a unity born out of years of oppression, of resistance, of defiance. The battle was no longer just a military confrontation. It was a statement. Humanity had not only survived, it had transcended. It had become something more than just the sum of its parts. The Council, once so confident in their control, found themselves outnumbered, outflanked, and overwhelmed. For the first time, they began to realize the true depth of their mistake. They had thought humanity was weak. They had assumed that without the protective hand of the Council, humans would crumble under pressure. But they had underestimated one critical factor: the human spirit. The battle that followed was nothing short of legendary. A cacophony of fire and fury echoed across the galaxy as the two fleets clashed, starships colliding in the void, their weapons lighting up the darkness like blazing stars. The humans fought with everything they had, not just for survival, but for their future, for their place in the universe. They fought for the right to exist on their own terms, without the heavy hand of the Council dictating their every move. And as the battle reached its zenith, a strange calm settled over the battlefield. The sound of destruction faded, replaced by the chilling realization that the Council had lost. Their arrogance had blinded them to the one thing that made humanity so formidable: the will to never surrender. Admiral Monroe stood at the helm of the Dauntless, her heart pounding in her chest. The final blows had been struck. The Council's fleets scattered to the winds, their once immense power reduced to nothing more than a fading memory. But even as victory surged through her veins, she knew that this battle was only the beginning. The galaxy was changing. The Council, though still formidable, had been dealt a blow from which they may never fully recover. But humanity, once a fledgling species caught in the web of galactic politics, was now a force to be reckoned with. The day would come when they would shape the destiny of the universe, not as subjugated citizens, but as leaders in their own right. And that was the true victory. The war was over, but the universe would never forget the day when humanity left. The Galactic Council and the universe shook. As Monroe watched the fading lights of the enemy fleet, she felt the weight of the future pressing down on her. Humanity had proven its worth. But what would come next? The journey was just beginning. If you enjoyed this epic battle, leave a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and tell us what you think humanity's next steps should be. Let's keep this conversation going. Where will humanity go from here?